All right, people of faith, let's take another walk. Let's continue on the subject of identity. As the spiritual creation develops, or we become more. No, we're in oneness with the spirit. Our spirit is in oneness with the Holy Spirit. Once that happens, our identity changes. The life that we once knew it as falls away, and it doesn't really make sense anymore. So like for example, uh, that money is our source, or different things become our source, or the ways that we have accumulated the knowledge that we have known up to that point would have made sense. Like to go to school, to do this, to do this, to do this, and none of it starts to make any sense. Not just sense in knowledge, or was considered common sense, was relatable, but it doesn't have a it doesn't fulfill you anymore. It reached a point where it touches certain areas, but it don't touch all of you. And when you when your spirit connects with the Holy Spirit, you become you become into an understanding that you want to be fulfilled in all aspects of you. So you become more than just what you thought you was, which was flesh oriented. And flesh oriented is basically listen to the commands, or the flesh operations is to listen to the commands of the Antichrist. Now, when Jesus comes into our life, our spirit get raised from the dead. That means our spirit, which we are a spirit. Let's say it again. We are a spirit, and that spirit comes alive when it meets Jesus. And then once we meet him, it's an invitation that we basically entangle ourselves with. We become to want, we see him and we want to follow him. So we become what? Followers of Christ. Not in the flesh, not where man can see it, but on the inward part. Our interests, our desires, our ambitions, our our whereabouts, where we want to place ourselves. We want to follow where Jesus is. If Jesus is not there, we don't want to be there, and we would know. So we want to be where Jesus is at, because our spirit wants to be one with him. Why? Because we would have seen and recognized his love, and there's no denying his love. What I mean by that is you would know, because his love is so one of a kind. You can't really place it with any other adaptation of what love can be, or any kind of identification, or any kind of description, that we could place love as. It doesn't compare to that. So anyway, what we're saying is that once our spirit comes with God, we elevate into this different identity. When you would know the difference between when the scriptures talk about being flesh or of the spirit, you immediately know the difference of if you are flesh or not. Flesh can only hang around flesh. Flesh can only listen to and absorb and learn from only the flesh. It can't be in the company of the Holy Spirit. So when you are separated from the flesh, that makes God your great provision. And he supplies you and he provides for you in such a way that you have never known. Not just in see that's just it. When you get transformed into the image of Christ, your fleshly necessities fades away. How can you when there's really no way that's the indication that you are a new creation. Your fleshly needs not just met at the time that they're due to be met. They don't even have a way to be positioned to present to you the suggestion that they need to be met. That's off the board now. Once you are separated from the flesh nature, there's a ground level that we start off on. That's when we start to see when we are walking with Christ, when we are chasing after Christ to become God's Jesus seeker or God seekers, however you want to say it. When we become that, we find ourselves separating from the things that gave us an identity, our ethnic group or a religious group or our physical stature group or all these different identities. That's to give us an identification or to classify us in a category. Once you get done with the flesh, you really don't find a category for you other than just to be in the presence of God. So you really don't want to be where the presence of God is not. This is how it goes. So casting your cares is not a thing you learn to do when you born again. It's a part of you. When the Bible gives you the description about how the just shall live by faith, or have no fear, for God overcome the world, that is inside the transformation. That's part of the package deal of Jesus. That is one thing to say that call those things to be not as though they were, but it's another thing for that to be demonstrated out of your life on a everyday basis. That's inside the package deal of Jesus. You can't just come to Jesus and all this is on you. He has to transform you. So in other words, your spirit has to be in alliance with his spirit. In other words, your soul will have to make a decision, a very distinct decision to follow what it sees or what it doesn't see. To follow Christ is to go after something that you can't physically see. It's an inward direction. Say, for example, if I use the example quite often, if you were to see a person, it's like if you're in a convenience store and you're in line and someone is ahead of you and they dig in their pocket and then as they taking their hand out of their pocket, they drop some money. Intentionally, whatever, unintentionally or intentionally, whatever, whichever way. You see, you got a choice of two. You ultimately have a choice of three, but we're going to number down the choice of two. You can either pick it up, or no, you could basically tell the person that they dropped the money, or you could pick it up for yourself. Which one you think is the way of Christ? So that lets you know if you're going to be stuck with the flesh or not. Those are tests. And they come quite often. To do what's right or to do what's wrong. To do what's wrong always make you come out on top. You always have to come out on top because that's the only way the flesh can convince you to believe that you're God, unless you come out on top. So if you were to come out at the bottom of the barrel, or not the bottom of the barrel, but if you were to come out of the least of the situation, how can you rule? That's how the flesh wants you to see it. How can you rule, or how can you get things to go your way if you're always looking out for everybody else? If you're always coming out at the bottom. And I notice this, with the identity of Christ, when our transition or transformation happens and the identity continues, and we grow into that, and we grow in that, let's say it that way, the Holy Spirit will become more of a personal friend. And it will talk to us in such a way when to do something, when not to do something. It will give us very, very specific details. When to do something, when not to do something. Who to consult to, who not to consult to. And that will be based upon if you are in relationship with God, if you are in communications with him. That's just talking. It doesn't matter the length of time that you talk. That depends on where your heart is. If your heart wants to be there, it's like any place where you want to be. You're not going to be somewhere that you don't want to be unless you're forced to be there, right? So if you want to be in a conversation with God for a length of time, you will. But just know this, when you spend time with him, you are evolving, you are changing. You are becoming something different. So within that becoming something different, things starts to fall off. That once was you. That once was your identity. That once was your go-tos, or the things that you live by, or that you could see yourself without. That changes, and you become something more. To the fact is that your ethnicity doesn't matter, your job positioning doesn't matter, your money status doesn't matter, your physical stature doesn't matter. Just things that we have grown accustomed to identify us, to make us actually, if you have it or you don't have it, is labeling you as if you are going to be accepted or not. No, that none of that matters. All that fades away with Christ. Because in God's kingdom, there is no discrepancy. There is no respect of persons. There is no that you're a Jew or Gentile, that you're circumcision or circumcision. There's none of that. It is either if you're going to be in obedience to him or not. That's all it is. Can you obey him or not? Can he, like we did with Adam and Eve in the garden? The situation was about obedience. It wasn't about the tree. It was about obedience. Who are you going to listen to? That determines who is your king. That determines who is your overlord. That determines where's your kingdom. That determines who's going to be your provision or who's going to be your provider. All right, people of faith, you are the blessed. Let's be the blessing. Let's keep walking.